Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So we will begin. Thank you for everyone to join today. I'll just give you a quick breakdown of what the agenda is going to be. Everything will be within about an hour. We will first start with Ray Porter, who is the chairman of the Irish Chamber of Commerce, and he will just give a brief introduction. That will be followed by the main bulk of the presentation, which will be given by James Hartshorn. He is the CEO and founder of BWAL, Bartra Wealth Advisors Limited. At the end, we will conclude with a Q&A session and a quick poll. Just a quick reminder to all audience members, you can ask questions throughout the webinar. There is a Q&A button and our admin team will try and answer as many questions as possible. So to kick it off, Ray, would you like to give your introduction? Thank you.
Hello, hi. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're delighted to be able to provide this information, working with Bartra on this. Just to remind people of the Chamber of Commerce, our purpose is really to connect businesses between Ireland, Hong Kong, and allow a platform to share information and education. We do not endorse or recommend any particular product or service. It's up to yourself to access any relevant information that you have on any business decision. So our core thing is to provide information, to give people a variety and choice, etc., and to educate. So thank you very, very much for joining, and I'm going to hand over now to James.
Sure, this is working. Okay, so thanks, Ray, and it's great to be cooperating together with the Irish Chamber in Hong Kong. Also, thanks to my team who are in Hong Kong currently for setting this up, and thanks to all of our participants for joining. So I'm going to run through a presentation now, which. Here we go. So the presentation is basically a walk through the Ireland Immigration Investment Programme, and then I'll talk a little bit about our company, and then I'll talk a bit about what our company have been doing specifically in the IIP space, so in the Immigrant Investor Programme space. This is a basic overview of what I'll be talking about. As I just mentioned. So I'll go into this first. So the Irish government have an immigration program, like many Western governments, and the program itself is very straightforward. It requires that all applicants, main applicants, be over 18 years of age. Other family members that are eligible under the main applicant would be children under 18 years of age, children between 18 to 24 if they're dependent. In order to apply for this program, you need to have a minimum net worth of €2 million. You would need to have no criminal record worldwide. Investment periods are between 3 and 5 years. That would depend on the individual investment going into. And the investment amount is a €1 million investment. There is another option for donation, which I'll speak to later. So those are the main aspects of the program in relation to who can apply. Other requirements that are worth noting would be that you would need to obtain a medical insurance, private medical insurance. This is something that a lot of people would have in Ireland anyway, and to get private medical care in Ireland is pretty affordable, considerably less than it would be in Hong Kong, and considerably less than it would be in somewhere like the US. You could probably get your whole family covered for between €2,000 and €3,000, so it's not a big expense. The program specifically precludes any social benefits such as social welfare. So the government take the view that if people are part of the program, that they can't become a financial burden on the state, so they wouldn't be entitled to certain social benefits, namely social welfare. And that's the sort of main aspects to the program. One of the highlights of this program is that it's very straightforward and it's also very quick. So I've got a timeline here where you can basically see roughly what the timeline would be, involved from taking this from your decision to go ahead with the Irish program until such point as which you actually get the visa. So the first body of work would be the preparation of documents. So we have a full office in Hong Kong now, and we also have an in-house lawyer there. We also work with other people in Hong Kong, notaries, etc., to prepare all of the documents. So we have the capacity to do this in-house. We've also prepared more files and had more successful files than probably the entirety of the market combined. So it's an area of expertise for us and something we're very good at. So the preparation of documents will generally take a month to 6 weeks. There's certain things there like getting documents apostilled and things that just take time. But generally we can put a file together pretty quickly. After this, you'd submit your documents to the Irish government. So the Irish program operates under a window system where they have 5 application windows throughout the year. Currently, given the COVID situation, the Irish government have temporarily suspended that, and they're basically allowing anyone to submit at any time up until the end of June, I believe it is. And then there's 2 more windows, one in August and one in October. So these are the submission windows when you'd actually submit the file. Generally, what we've seen in the last 12 to 18 months is that approvals are taking around 4 months. So that's sort of the period of time from when your application goes in until such time as you receive an official approval letter from the Irish government. And that's basically just to approve your investment, your application, to say that you and your family members have been approved. The next step after that will be a transfer of funds to your chosen project. And what makes the Irish program very unique is that sort of step from 3 to 4. So there's no actual financial commitment required until such point as you have received an official approval from the Irish government, which obviously eliminates a lot of risk around that. So there's no requirement for any investment until you're absolutely certain that you've been approved by the Irish government, which I think is a very advantageous step in the Irish process. And after that, after the transfer of funds, then you would be invited to Ireland to the offices of INIS, which are in Dublin, and there you'd be given the visa. It's a stamp in a passport, and then it's also an actual identity card as well. So you get both of those things when you visit Ireland. When you would come to Ireland, we have landing teams, so we would facilitate everything that needs to happen there. We would generally bring people to our office too, and then we would bring people as well if they wanted to see the projects. We have, I think, over 40 live projects around the city, so it's a good opportunity to kind of see what we're doing in Dublin and get a feel for the company and what we're doing. So to go back to this, so that you can see the 5 steps there, it's all very straightforward. Usually that should be done inside a 6-month period. So you'll try and get through everything in 6 months, which is very attractive. Other programs are considerably longer. So one of the big advantages of the Irish program is that it's very fast and efficient. And that's something we've found has been quite attractive for our clients. Another advantage to this is that there's no language requirement. Ireland is an English-speaking country, as I'm sure most of you know. There's no English, there's no language requirement. And even if you wanted to go on to obtain Irish citizenship, there's no language test at that stage either. Another advantage to this program is that it's very light on residency requirement. So in order to maintain the status that you would receive, there's only a requirement to spend 1 day per year in Ireland. I think that the reasoning behind this was that it's understood that a lot of people who sort of avail of these programs, they're running businesses in their home country, and they're usually quite busy, so they mightn't have the time to sort of fully move to the country yet, and this is something that they might be doing for the future. So this 1 day per year would give investors the flexibility to obtain the visa now, and then at a later date, if they choose to move to Ireland, they have the option to do that whenever they want. And then at that point, if you actually move to Ireland, you can begin your road to citizenship. The two are treated quite separately. The obtaining of Irish citizenship is the same for anyone. This program facilitates the sort of speeding up of getting what's called a stamp 4 visa, which would equate to Irish PR, permanent residency. And then once you have PR, you can begin your citizenship journey, which takes around 5 years. So it's 5 years of living in Ireland to be eligible for Irish citizenship. And I'll just quickly make one point on Irish citizenship, because it's quite a unique scenario we have with Britain. So Irish passport holders are in something called the Common Travel Area. This is something that was set up between Ireland and England, I believe in the 1920s. And it basically allows for Irish citizens to travel and work visa-free in the UK and vice versa. So people from the UK can come and live and work in Ireland too, visa-free. It also allows Irish passport holders are actually allowed to take part in certain elections in the UK. So it's very much almost like a reciprocal citizenship between the two jurisdictions. And what makes this, I suppose, particularly interesting now is that England haven't chosen to leave the EU. Nobody really knows what it's going to look like yet, but one of the possible implications is that there will be a travel border, so if you were from a different country in the EU, you would be subject to this, but because of the CTA, the Common Travel Area, Irish passport holders wouldn't. We'd still be able to travel there visa-free and work there visa-free, and both governments have committed to that. So if you go onto the English Home Office website, you'll see a commitment to the Common Travel Area, and then the Irish government have also expressed a commitment to it as well. So that will be in place post-Brexit, which is obviously very attractive, because it means that the Irish passport is the only passport in the world that would actually give you access to both the UK and the EU. So that's just something I thought I'd mention. So that's basically the program. As you can see, it's very straightforward. Putting the files together is what takes the most time. And as I said, it's an area of expertise. We've put together over 200 and probably close to 300 files at this stage. We have a 100% approval. So we've got a lot of in-house expertise about getting files together, what they need to look like, and sort of presenting them in a way that the people who are receiving them like. So we've very extensive experience in this, and it's something we're very confident in. So that's pretty much the program. Again, we can touch on that more in the questions and answers section. And obviously we have a huge amount more detail. We have very detailed documents that show what are the specific documents required, where you get them notarized, etc., all this type of stuff. So the main, I suppose, takeaways from the program are that it requires investment only after you've been approved. So there's no financial risk until such point as you've been officially approved. There's only a residency requirement of 1 day per year, and the processing time is very quick. One thing I didn't mention is that when you initially receive your visa, that's for 2 years, and then it's renewed for 3 years. The point of renewal requires some documentation from us or whoever you choose to invest it, and it's basically to prove that your investment is still in place. So before you actually get the visa, you would have made the investment, and then 2 years later, we would show documentation to prove that the investment is still in place. Then you would receive another investment for another visa, sorry, for 3 years. After that combined 5 years, the visa is renewed into perpetuity, essentially, every 5 years. So every 5 years it's renewed for another 5 years, and that's ongoing. And after you have your investment returned, be that after 3 or 5 years, depending on the investment choice, there's no further requirement for any investment. So once you sort of have cashed out, so to speak, there's no other investment required. So basically, you could have your investment returned after 3 years, and then the visa essentially is with you for life. So that's pretty much everything on the visa side. And as I said, there's generally a lot more questions around that. And usually, what we'll do is we like to invite people to the office to sort of meet one of our representatives, one of our team members in there, and they can talk them through the much more detailed version of this. So now I will chat a little bit about our company. So Bartra Wealth Advisors is a company within the Bartra Group. It was co-founded by myself and Richard Barrett. And the purpose of this business within the group is specifically for raising funds around the Immigrant Investor Programme. We're the biggest company in the Immigrant Investor Programme. We have the most successful applicants. We've also one of the only companies in Ireland with a 100% approval record. So the Bartra itself was founded by Richard Barrett. Richard is, he'd be a very famous figure at home. He's a very well-known developer. And we started this company in mid-2016, as I said, with the specific focus of raising funds via IIP. My experience is that I've lived in China for over 10 years. I'm not there now. I've been based in Shanghai for the last 10 years. I wasn't able to get back in recently. I missed the cutoff of the borders. So I'm back home in Ireland currently. And yeah, the bulk of my time there has been spent in immigration and real estate development. Richard has lived in Shanghai for close to 20 years at this stage. His previous venture, he had a listed company which was listed in Singapore, and they were operational in mainland China. They had about 2 billion euros under management at one stage, and that company was sold in 2013, I believe. So Richard is a very well-known figure at home. He's someone who features a lot in the media and the press, and he'd be very well regarded as one of Ireland's top developers. So this is some of Richard's track record. These are some of his previous developments. So you can see here one from Shanghai. It was all mainland China. They never got involved in Hong Kong. They said it was very much sort of, there was a few key developers there and it was very hard to break in. So all of their Asia experience was specifically in mainland China. And then obviously very extensive experience in Ireland. Most of the major offices, many of the major offices at home, Richard would have been responsible for. Also the Ritz-Carlton and a variety of other large-scale developments. Also in the UK, Richard's responsible for the development of Battersea Power Station, which at the time was the largest development in Europe. Also Google's headquarters. And just on the topic of Google, I'm sure a lot of people are aware that Ireland is the home to many Fortune 500 companies, particularly tech and pharma. This is for a variety of reasons. The main reason for this, that a lot of these companies choose Ireland as their home, is to do with our education system, which results in a very strong workforce. So European employers actually rank Irish graduates #1 in the EU, which is obviously a very positive statement. Ireland also has quite a favorable corporate tax rate at 12.5%. And over the past 30 to 40 years, Ireland has attracted the biggest and best companies in the world. And when these companies come to Ireland, it isn't in the capacity of a sort of a tax haven or like a brass plate on the wall. They have huge operations in Ireland. Google, for example, who I just mentioned, as Richard built their office, they have close to 10,000 people now in Ireland. And all of the major tech companies have a very good presence here. And I suppose, given that what we're going through, there's a lot of talk about, you know, the post-COVID environment and the post-COVID economy. And I suppose some of the companies that are excelled or sort of been less affected by this are the tech and pharma companies. And these are actually the two largest sectors in Ireland. Ireland is the largest exporter of certain pharmaceuticals because so many large pharmaceutical companies will use Ireland as their European hub, and the same with a lot of tech companies. If you look at the top 4 tech companies at the moment, from the Fortune 500, that's probably Google, Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft. They're all in Dublin. Well, Apple are actually in Cork, but they're all in Ireland, and they're all there in a very big way. I mean, I mentioned Google; they have over 10,000 people. Amazon have a few thousand. Apple, I think, are close to 10,000 as well, and Microsoft will be probably in that region as well. So they're a huge presence there, and this isn't really a new thing. Apple have been there, I think, since 1980, and I think Microsoft from 85. So these guys have been long established in Ireland. And I suppose one of the benefits of this is certainly a lot of our clients, when they're looking at doing this program, it's generally for their children. And people often say that the reason they're doing this is they want their kids to be educated in Ireland. And one of the really important aspects of, I suppose, being educated in Ireland is that when you graduate into this environment where you have all of these major corporations. So all of these guys are going to be doing grad programs. There's going to be internship options. They obviously recruit huge numbers. So it's a very good environment to sort of graduate into for that very reason. And Ireland it's been a very strong success case in terms of attracting FDI. There's actually quite a remarkable statistic that Ireland attracts more foreign direct investment from the US. So the US actually put more foreign direct investment into Ireland than they do into China, India, Russia, and Brazil combined. So it's an absolutely staggering figure. And it's a testament to sort of how well the Irish government have attracted these companies, how strong our education system is in that it's resulted in a very strong workforce. Yeah, so, and obviously the fact that we're the home to most of the major Fortune 500 companies in the world. The business infrastructure in Ireland is very, very solid. And I think we've been ranked the best country in the world to do business almost every year for the last number of years by Forbes. So it's a very business friendly place. And also the economic effect of this is obviously very positive. Ireland has been the best growing or best performing economy in the EU for the last 5 years, and is set to for the next few as well. Obviously, things have changed. We don't really know. No one really knows what's happening or going forward, but certainly a lot of these pillar industries will remain unchanged. Definitely tech and pharma anyway. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit about the track record, and then also just a bit about Ireland as a destination. I'll kind of chat a bit more now about our company specifically. So the Bartra Group is a very diversified developer. We're one of the largest developers in Ireland, but we're definitely the most diversified developer in Ireland in that we develop across quite a range of different asset categories. So you can see here we have a commercial real estate portfolio. That's a development that we're just about to start construction on. That's in a place called what's called Silicon Docks. So it's the Dockland area of Dublin where Richard had previously built Google's office, and a lot of the tech companies are obviously down there. Facebook are down there, and a variety of other guys. And that's sort of been nicknamed the Silicon Docks. So that office that's shown there is down there. And then our commercial portfolio at the moment is in the region of a $250 million. Our healthcare portfolio, which currently consists only of nursing homes. I'll talk more about them later on. That's around 150 million. Residential is around 100 million. We also develop social housing. So social housing and healthcare, the nursing homes I mentioned, these are the two investment categories that qualify under the Immigrant Investor Programme. So these are two I'll talk more about. The others are just being shown as a reference to sort of highlight that we're a very diversified developer, and we develop in many sectors outside of IIP. We use the IIP, the Immigrant Investor Programme, as a source of funding for two of our asset categories, and the rest we will fund with a blend of other financial partners. And we also do some renewable energy stuff. So just to kind of recap, the two investment categories here that I mentioned that qualify under the Immigrant Investor Programme are healthcare, nursing homes, and social housing. Yeah, we get featured in the media a lot. We've also featured a lot in Hong Kong media, some in the mainland, not as much. Yeah, we're obviously featured a huge amount at home. We're a very well-known developer. We're large developers in the country, certainly the largest in terms of active projects. We have over 40 live projects at the moment in different stages of development. Two of our largest projects, Boston Sidelings, is the one I just showed, the commercial one. And then also we're involved in a project called O'Devney Gardens, which is probably the largest sort of public-private partnership in the country. It's a huge site. So we were quite lucky in that we hadn't actually gone on site in those two biggest sites. And then in relation to construction, most of the building sites in Ireland opened on Monday. So all of the construction sector is starting to get going again, which is obviously very positive. But yeah, as you can see from the last slide, we're a very active developer, and then obviously we feature a lot in the media. So it's comforting to know that the company that you would be investing with is a very well-known brand, and it features a lot in the media, both at home and in Hong Kong. As you can see there, we featured in a lot of the Hong Kong publications. We opened the office in Hong Kong in September last year, and we've been pretty active down there ever since. We work with every major financial institution in Ireland. This is obviously a very important point when one is considering investing with a company. All of our developments meet the scrutiny of a bank's due diligence team, which are probably the most rigorous standards globally. Banks tend to be the hardest people to get money off, and all of our projects are banking grade. So that's a very strong, I suppose it's a very strong testament to the quality of our projects and also to the quality of the developer that we are. So looking at this, you can see AIB, Ulster Bank, and Bank of Ireland. Those are the three pillar banks in Ireland. Allied Irish Bank, Bank of Ireland, and Ulster Bank. Yeah, we've a strong relationship with all of them. Some are involved in different aspects. AIB and Bank of Ireland both lend on nursing homes, both on social too, and then with our resi as well, residential as well. Then there's some non-bank lenders. The most interesting that are featured here are Activate Capital. So Activate Capital is a joint venture that was set up between KKR, who are an enormous New York-based hedge fund, one of the biggest in the world, and ISIF, that's the Irish Strategic Investment Fund, which is a government fund. So that joint venture was set up with the core purpose of building more houses. So they're a lender on a variety of our projects as Activate. And then ISIF, which is the Strategic Investment Fund, as I said, which is a government fund, they're investing with us directly. So they're investing with us via Activate as part of the JV, and then also directly. That's actually into our co-living. So we work with all the major financial institutions. We have very good relationships with all of them, and they're happy to lend on all of our projects, which is a testament to both the quality of the projects and the quality of our development team. So then coming back to closer to that part of the world, we have a pretty strong Asian network. We have over 20 full-time employees just focused on Asia. We have 5 offices. So most of our offices are in mainland. We've got an office in Beijing, we have an office in Shanghai, we have an office in Shenzhen. We now have an office in Hong Kong as of last September, October. We also have an office in Vietnam, in Ho Chi Minh. And this year we will be opening offices in Dubai and probably 2 India offices. With specific locations are still being decided. We've over 270 successful Irish cases. So we have 100% approval rate, which means every application we've ever submitted has been approved, which is a testament obviously to the quality of the underlying projects and also to our document processing team. We've seen a huge number of files, so we're very proficient in putting files together, and we know sort of how to guide clients through that process in a very efficient manner. We also do a huge amount of marketing events. The physical events have obviously been somewhat put on hold, hence the digital ones, but we're still doing a lot of events. You know, we're very grateful to join the chamber today. We're also doing something similar with Knight Frank next week, and then we'll be rolling sort of every weekend or every week we'll be doing something with someone else. All digital for now. I'm sure maybe later in the summer the physical events will start again, at which point we'll be pretty active in that as well. So that's kind of what we do in Asia, and as I said, all the business for now is focused on the IIP, the Immigrant Investor Programme. So all of our Asian offices are designed to raise funds for that, and all of the areas we have offices are obviously our key markets. The bulk of our clients until last year would have been from China, from mainland, and then since we've opened the office, we've seen a huge increase in business from Hong Kong. So I touched on this earlier when I spoke about our overall development portfolio. So the 2 project categories that qualify for investment under the program are healthcare, in our case, nursing homes, and social housing. These 2 asset classes are, the reason the government approved them is that they're 2 critically undersupplied assets in Ireland. Nursing homes are undersupplied everywhere, but Ireland is particularly, it's particularly bad in Ireland. There's a huge undersupply. There's also a huge undersupply of social housing. There's a huge undersupply of every type of housing in Ireland, which obviously affects social housing. So the numbers for this, I mean, the social housing numbers are in the region of, the numbers required in the region of 100,000 units. And that was sort of pre-COVID, so I'm not sure what that would be now. But yeah, you're looking at an undersupply of around 100,000 units. So there's a huge amount of work to be done to get that to where it needs to be. Nursing homes, there's around 10,000 people waiting list for nursing homes. So again, both assets hugely undersupplied. The reason that the government the reason the government allow for private developers to fund and build these assets is that the Irish government, like most governments in the EU, are restricted in borrowing. So there's something in Ireland called a growth, in the EU, called a Growth and Stability Pact, which was brought in after the last financial crisis. The idea basically being that the EU didn't want individual countries getting into too much debt, particularly for capital projects. So most countries under the program are restricted in borrowing. So governments will generally try and find ways to keep core assets off balance sheet. And the method for both nursing homes and social housing allows for this. So that's why it's a very attractive option for the government. And then obviously they'll allow the IIP to be used as funding because that can create a cheap funding supply to these areas that are in very bad need of funding. When I mentioned earlier that the housing supply, that was basically to do with the financial crisis. After the financial crisis in 08, 09, the Irish banks were essentially wiped out, and with that they took most of the developers. So there was a period of around 8 years in Ireland when very, very little was built, virtually nothing. And that was as a result of having no finance from the banks and no developers. So basically, this resulted in a situation where you have a huge undersupply because the population was still growing. We still had a lot of people coming in. I mean, the tech companies, everyone was still employing. So you still had immigration and natural population growth, but that wasn't met with an increase in supply of housing stock or office stock or any other type of development, nursing homes included. So you've got a situation now where there's a big supply deficit, and that's something that that's one of our core missions, is to sort of meet that. So we've got an aggressive plan to operate 1,500 nursing home beds. We're at about probably close to 800 or 900 now. And then our social housing, the plan is to build 1,200 social housing units. We're at about 300 to 400 now, various stages of development. And then we've got a big project coming online, which will be close to 1,000. So we should be on track to hit those. Then in terms of the individual projects themselves, so this is our nursing home portfolio. So this is IIP money would be involved in all these. So the first one, Loch Shinny, this is built now. It finished last May. It was May last year, and now we're at very close to full capacity. You can see how it's designed. It's kind of spread out, which fortuitously has worked out well for the sort of isolation of COVID. Nursing homes have been an area globally that have been one of the sort of more adversely affected areas. Obviously, the virus, the worst of it is seen in the elderly, and this is kind of where a lot of elderly people are. So we've been quite fortuitous with Loch Shinny in that we've been able to kind of like separate out the wings and isolate them from each other. So that's the natural design of that has become very favorable. And we're at a situation now where we've got no cases over there. The second project in terms of chronological order is Northwood. So we finished construction on that in February, and we've opened. Usually takes a few weeks for the government to give approvals and sort of sign off on all of the standards, etc. So we went through that process recently, and we just had our first patient last Thursday. So that's open as well. Beaumont is due to finish construction at the end of the summer. There was a delay as the building sites in Ireland closed for around 5 weeks, but we were 3 months ahead of schedule on that, so it won't be affected, which is great. And then the fourth nursing home is Clondalkin, which is going to start construction probably middle of June. And those are all of our nursing homes. We put these, sorry. So sorry, just get rid of the sound. I'm just going to quickly show a clip from this. This is from one of our live construction cameras. We put construction cameras on all of our projects, and we do this sort of in the interest of transparency. So all of our investors that come in would get access to the particular construction camera on the site in which they've invested, and they can watch it in real time. This is obviously a time lapse, but when you look at the cameras, normally they're basically just still view, and you can see people wandering around the site doing what they're doing. So it's a very nice feature, and I think it brings a lot of comfort to investors to be able to see the actual progress of the project in real time. So the next area of the business that we raise funds for via IIP is social housing. As I said, social housing is hugely undersupplied, and the government have a very comprehensive plan to really build a lot more of these units because there's huge demand for it. We usually raise money for these in like phases. So you can see here phase 1, phase 2. We're currently putting sites together for phase 3, and then there'll be a phase 4 and so on. We bundle projects together for a variety of reasons. One is that it'll give investor diversification across a few different projects. The other is that the project sizes are usually quite small. And we want to have a larger raise as opposed to a lot of smaller raises. The reason they're all small, this is to do with how the government wants social housing to be spread across the city. I think it's the same in most cities now. Previously, there was a method whereby all of the social would be sort of put in one area, and then that area would generally, historically anyway, would become quite a rundown area and result in, you know, certainly in LA and in the UK, there was social issues and stuff. So the modern approach to this is to have smaller numbers of social housing units dotted around the city, so they're spread out. And that's certainly what's happening at home. The really attractive thing about social housing as an investor is that with social housing, these are leased back to the Irish government, as I mentioned. So if you look at the sort of development cycle of this, we'll go out and buy a piece of land using our own funds. We will then sign a lease with the Irish government to lease the property office. That's a 25-year lease. And then once the building is finished, the lease will take hold. So by the end of it, we have a fixed asset with an income derived from the Irish state, which is obviously an incredibly attractive asset. And then we'd sell the completed assets to a pension fund. So there's a variety of pension funds we work with, and we sell the completed assets with the lease attached to them. And this has proven to be very successful. The enhanced lease is the specific lease that we work under. So, I mean, if you wanted to just Google enhanced lease Ireland, I'm sure Warren can probably send a link to people afterwards. It's a very attractive lease that the Irish government came up with. It's a 25-year lease. It's index linked, so it's linked to inflation. And in addition to that, the rent payable is 95% of market value. So we get virtually market value for products which are let to the government. So I mean, it's super attractive from an investment point of view, and that's how we're able to find buyers for these very easily. Again, this is another construction cam. This one is from a site we have in Stony Batter, which is a very, very good area in Dublin. It's very central. Yeah, we have all these on our website. So if you wanted to watch the full videos for whatever reason, they're all on there. And then the last category, investment category, is to do with donations. So this is basically if you wanted to make a donation, so give away the money, not to get it back. There's an option for that too. It's called endowment. So these are some of the guys you've worked with: Beaumont Hospital, St. Vincent's Hospital, the Simon Community. They're a charity that work with homeless people. Obviously, the lack of housing results in a lack of social housing, results in a lack of accommodation for people, which results in homelessness. And then the homelessness issue also affects the social housing thing, because of the lack of social housing supply. The government are providing a lot of temporary accommodation for people, which in some cases looks like hotels. So you have this sort of scenario where the government are paying huge amounts for short-term accommodation, where these people should really be housed in social housing, and it's just a supply issue. There isn't enough supply yet. So this is something that developers like us are really working to to bridge that gap. So to quickly summarize, the three investment options, well, I suppose donations aren't an investment, but the three investment options. So these are the qualifying investments for the program. Our nursing home product, where we offer a 5-year loan, and then we offer investors 4% interest on that. Our social housing is a 3-year loan. That's a non-interest loan. We sort of arrived at that figure based on a risk ratio, how small we see the risk in that. And then donations. So as I mentioned, donations are 500,000 as an individual, or if you have a group of 5, which we generally will because we sort of aggregate our investors, then that can be 400,000. But just to be very clear, that's not money that's returned. With the loans, the investment loans, so that's a €1 million loan that's given back after 5 years if it's a nursing home, with interest of 4%, so it'd be 1.2 million received back. And then the social housing will be 3 years. You receive the funds back and there'll be no interest. Donation, the money is just given away. So there are the three options. Again, chat more about them in person. and then a very quick summary of what I mentioned. Yeah, something I didn't actually mention was we give a guarantee from our parent co as well. So for each of our investment categories, we have a parent co. So we have a parent company that owns all of our social housing and a parent company that owns all of our nursing homes. So as an investor, you would lend directly to the project, and then you'd have the strength of a guarantee from the parent co that owns all the assets. So that's, I think I probably went over a little bit there, but that is basically a quick summary of what we're doing, the IIP, and a bit about Ireland. Obviously, there's a lot more detail available on all of them that we can get into. Warren, did you want to go through some questions?
Sure. So let's just kick off the Q&A session. James, if you can unshare your screen, and then we can blast away. Any audience members who want to ask questions, please start. We've answered a few already, but there are some outstanding.
Okay.
Yeah,
do you want to just read from what people are writing?
So
okay.
The first one someone's got is, how is Bartra assuring investors that they get their money back after the required investment period is over, given the economic uncertainty?
Yeah, I mean, the economic uncertainty only becomes a factor if the business you're in relies on sort of, for example, social housing is a government-backed revenue, so it's recession-proof. So are nursing homes. The nursing homes, I just realized I didn't mention this, the nursing homes also derive their income from the state, from the Irish government. So when someone's in a nursing home bed, it's actually the state that's paying to have them there. So the reason that we focus on these two asset categories is to do with the low risk profile, and that low risk profile extends into sort of economic periods of up and down. Exiting our and actually for assets like government-backed revenue, social housing, and healthcare, these are usually where capital will sort of fly to from riskier asset categories, like certainly things like hospitality, ongoing things like airlines now, obviously, and then to a lesser extent, commercial office and residential. I think that commercial and residential will remain, they'll obviously be affected, but to much a lesser extent, because they were both so undersupplied coming into this, that whatever sort of effect happens to demand will sort of be offset by the fact that there was just such an undersupply. So the exiting capacity for both our asset categories remains really unchanged, because the income derived in both cases is from the Irish government. So you'll always have people who want to buy government-backed assets. In fact, more so in times of economic uncertainty. So there's usually actually a flight to capital to these types of asset categories. And then, so how we exit investors is we basically sell to a pension fund. In the case of the healthcare units, that'd be more, that's not really a pension fund type purchase. That would be more to do with healthcare funds. So there's a lot of large healthcare funds around Europe, and these are the types of guys that we'd be looking to exit us on our investment, on our nursing home portfolio. And that's why the nursing home loans are 5 years and the social are 3, because the sort of investment life cycle of a nursing home is longer. It takes a bit longer to get people in there and get it set up and get it stabilized. So to answer the question, it hasn't really affected us. If you were invested in something like operational businesses, which weren't government backed, like hotels, for example, then I think that this would be a very adverse effect, and it'd be a tricky one to get out of. But thankfully, because of the government revenues there, the asset categories are largely unchanged. We always describe both of these as being recession proof. That's what makes them such good investments.
Okay, cool. So that answers that question. The next one is a 4-part question, and I'll give you number 1. So the first one is, what's the updated number of Hong Kongers that filed an IIP application since Bartra launched its operation in the city last year?
From us, we're like, they don't break down the numbers between China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. It's just sort of like the greater China. So I can't give you a breakdown. I know that our office, we've done, I think somewhere in the region of 40 or 50 clients from Hong Kong since we opened. it's something around that. I mean, you guys should have
Okay.
that number in the office.
Yeah.
I don't have it at hand, but I mean, from our perspective, it's around that. And you know, that was enormously up from, you know, the same period the year before.
Correct.
We'd seen very little sort of volume from Hong Kong until we opened the office. And then obviously being there and having a presence there and being able to sort of have a facility where clients can come in and see us, it obviously helps a lot. So Hong Kong is an area, or is a market we're very focused on.
And the second part, which is a follow-up, is, you know, how has, you know, Hong Kongers and mainland Chinese clients taken the IIP program, given the pandemic and everything that's happened in the last year?
Yeah, the pandemic, the thing is more just like we see it more as just like a temporary kind of pause. Like certainly in mainland, I mean, most of it was shut down, so people couldn't travel, and you know, everything went into lockdown. So there was a period where, you know, we just didn't really have any inbound clients because, you know, everyone was sitting at home, and you know, we still had a lot of inquiries, but people couldn't really leave or do anything. It was, as the lockdown was in, and as the lockdown started to move around the world, you saw that in other countries. Hong Kong never really went into lockdown, as far as I remember. But there was obviously, you know, when you have periods of uncertainty, people tend to sort of hold off on investment. And we've sort of, from what I see anyway, we're past that now. I think people have sort of dealt with whatever the initial impact of it was, and people are more comfortable now. So although we did see a period of a pretty sharp slowdown in terms of inquiries, that's starting to get normalized now again. So, I mean, it was more just a short pause while people sort of recalibrated, and now it's getting back to normal.
And James, has that affected the process, duration and the application for
No.
the IIP?
No, in fairness to the government, they've been pretty, no. I mean, our guys that we put in last August, then October, have all been approved. Our guys from February still haven't, but that's normal. You know, that's usually 4 or 5 months, so I'd anticipate that they'll be coming out pretty soon. The government have been really smart about how to handle this. I think the Irish government have done a really good job overall with COVID, immeasurably superior to what's happened in England. But they've been very practical. I mean, we had a few cases where we had some of our guys coming over for renewals. Obviously, they couldn't travel, so the government said basically, okay, we can just extend that by a few months until such time as you can come to Ireland. So they've been very practical about it, very realistic about it. So I think how it's been handled at home has been really good. And to answer the question, it hasn't caused any delays, thankfully.
Okay. And everyone knows that Bartra by trade are predominantly developers. Someone's asking here, May Lam is saying, has Bartra been approached by any Hong Kong investors or developers to do any sort of JVs on any of the projects that we're doing?
We just wouldn't do that. You know, we tend not to JV with people. Well, we would JV with people in certain circumstances. So on some of the commercial stuff, we JV'd with a company called Henley, not Henley Partners, the immigration company. It's a finance company from the UK. So Henley Bartra is there. Not so much in Hong Kong, actually. I think Ireland's probably a little too small scale for the ginormous Hong Kong developers. We get that a bit in mainland. You know, people looking to diversify their investment portfolio and look to try and get into Ireland as a market. Generally, we tend not to JV unless someone's bringing a considerable amount of value. You know, we're the best developer in Ireland in many of the sectors we're in. So it would be hard to find a partner that could add substantial value. But some of our investors, for example, will do the immigrant investor thing to obtain the visa. And then outside of that, they'll be like, okay, well, we actually want to invest for a return or a better return. So they look at some of the non-IIP aspects of the business and try and get involved in some of those. And that happens.
And we could add an edge and provide some value and advise them as well outside.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. We've got over 40 people in Dublin. We've got probably one of the most extensive development teams in the country. Okay.
And James, just give an idea of, there's a general broad question about expansion in Asia. You know, we've got offices in Hong Kong, in China, but you know, recently we've acquired an office in Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam. Could you just elaborate on the expansion plan in Asia and the demand that's growing in EM markets for the IIP program?
Yeah, we kind of covered the demand in Asia. We started in China. We opened our Shanghai office, I think, 4 years ago. And China traditionally has been the biggest buyer of immigration products, biggest investor in immigration products across Canada, UK. Well, Canada is probably actually more Hong Kong, certainly in the early days. But that part of the world is generally where most clients come from. And in the last few years, we're starting to see markets like India emerging. There's some of the South American countries you're starting to see sort of big demand coming from there. Portugal, for example, has seen big demand from South Africa and Brazil. The Brazil connection, obviously, to language and historical ties. But for us, the focus is still on mainland, more so on Hong Kong. And that's why we've expanded that office, probably more than our China offices. Vietnam is a country that's had an economic explosion. I think a lot of the manufacturing from China has kind of moved down there. So there's been a big boom, and it's a country that acquires immigration benefits. They're pretty high up on the list for EB5, the US program. So Ireland is obviously a very good fit there. So that's why it makes sense to be down there. And then our next offices that open will be India and Dubai as well. Dubai is to the Middle East what Hong Kong is to Asia. I mean, it's the sort of gathering ground. It's the financial hub where everyone kind of comes. So I mean, that makes sense to cover the Middle Eastern market. So that's probably the expansion plan this year, and then we'll see where we go next year.
Perfect. I think that wraps up most questions. I've got one final kind of broad question. I guess people who want to, understand more about the stability of the Irish economy, rather than Bartra, because we've covered that, but for Ireland itself, how stable is Ireland as an economy, country, the government policies? If you could just basically give investors, more confidence in Ireland, what would you say?
For the best performing tech companies in the world, who are sort of the ones that have done like the best out of this, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and what's the fourth one? Apple. These guys outside of the US, they have their biggest offices in Ireland, so that employment isn't going to be affected. The pharma companies are the same. In fact, they're expanding. Salesforce is still expanding. There's a bunch of companies in Ireland that are still hiring. Obviously things that are dependent on the movement of people. So, the likes of your hospitality industry, hotels are going to be hit hard. The restaurants will take a bit of a slowdown, but I think they'll come back. I'm certainly in Hong Kong, you saw that. There was kind of a slowdown on that front, and now everything seems to be back to normal. I think Ireland is getting there. The government have a very intelligent, sort of well thought out plan about slowly reintroducing and reopening stages of the economy. It's kind of unlike anything I've seen anywhere, actually. And it's just done in a pretty intelligent way. It's well thought out, so they'll get the economy back to where it needs to be, and they'll do it in a controlled way so that if something happens, if there's another spike or whatnot, they're able to sort of pull levers to adjust that. But to answer the question, the Irish economy coming into this was the best performing in the EU. I just don't have the figures in front of me, but I'm pretty sure our GDP last year was 7.6% or something in that region. Right. We're projected to be 5 or 6 this year. Obviously, that'll take a bit of a hit because the whole global economy was pretty much put on pause for X number of months. But I think if you look at the fundamentals of the Irish economy, they really stack up. We're a huge employment base from companies that won't be affected by this, and that's a huge thing to sort of take away. So it's hard to know the economic outfall of this globally. There's been a lot of stimulus packages and stuff, so that'll offset some of the down. But borrowing in Ireland, the big difference between this and the last sort of cycle, that was a debt crisis. So the result of that was that the Irish government and most governments had a huge debt problem. That's not the case this time. The Irish sort of balance sheet is in a much better place than it was then. So that's a positive. The Irish economy, I think, is a lot more robust, and a lot of our sort of big industries like tech and pharma will remain unchanged. So those are the sort of positives I'd take from this.
Okay. I think that wraps up most of the questions. There are specific questions which I think you've covered before. One gentleman is...
Yeah, I guess the good thing... Oh, sorry, go on, yeah.
No, sorry, James, go for what you were saying. One good thing.
One of the benefits of, I suppose, a digital event versus a live event is that, we can just continue to chat to people. You've got the chat function there, so you can just continue chatting to people. I know a lot of people, it's 1 o'clock there, so a lot of people are probably going to be going back to work. But I mean, yeah, if you want to we'll do one last question, and then you guys can sort of handle them digitally, and we'll just wrap things up. Sure, Ray wants to
just go back to Bartra again. What is Bartra doing? So you've spoken about Ireland, how the government has shielded the economy and what stimulus programs they're doing to stimulate the country, so this impact won't hit them heavily. But on the Bartra end, how can you guarantee investors that this hasn't affected us? That we're still very strong, our assets are doing very well, we're still very cash rich. How would you answer that question on the Bartra front?
Generally, when something happens that causes the closure of sites, that can result in increased finance costs or delays in projects. We've just been quite fortuitous in that our 2 biggest construction projects haven't started yet. So that could have led to some issues had they been operational. They weren't. All of our other sites that are open, we were pretty far ahead. We're pretty robust in how we build things and who we work with. So, all of our contractors have construction bonds. So if they can't finish the site, the bond will pay for someone else to finish the site. We also have pretty aggressive terms around overshot of time. So if someone goes over time, they'll be penalized heavily. So generally our constructors are working very ahead of schedule, so they'll be sort of like a few months further along than they would normally be. So like Beaumont is a good example. Like Beaumont, we were 3 or 4 months ahead of schedule. Now we've had a 5-week setback. So, we're still sort of like up on time, if that makes sense, which is, obviously very positive for that side. And that's the same across, all of our projects, really. So we don't have a huge sort of debt to equity ratio. So, we're not in a position where we're like massively over leveraged. So that's a positive. Usually when problems emerge with developers, it's usually to do with very market dependent assets. So if we were building, a lot of high end apartments or, hotels or something that would really require market activity, and market confidence, then I think, yeah, there's certain aspects of the business that could be in trouble. But the fact that we focus predominantly on very safe assets, government-backed assets, and even our commercial portfolio, like I don't think the commercial scene in Ireland will be enormously affected because there's just such strong demand. I mean, we flipped a building in the middle of this thing for 16 million. There's an article about that. It's I'm not sure how we can share things here, but like there's just Google recent Bartra transactions. So you're reading every day about commercial transactions that are happening. So the commercial market is still very buoyant. It's still active. So I don't see any adverse effects there. I think what a way to answer that question is to look at what your underlying asset is. And then if the underlying asset is problematic, as I said, if it's like something like a hotel, if it's something like an airline, yeah, then you're going to have problems. But like if you're building essentially infrastructure, that's going to be
and Bartra owns all the assets, correct, that they purchase?
Yeah, we own everything.
Good.
Yeah, obviously with the JV with Henley, there's the co-ownership there of those assets. And that's purely on the commercial side, certain aspects of the commercial side. But yeah, generally we'll go out, buy the land, raise funds from either IIP, bank, other financial institution, whoever, build the thing out, and then either hold it if that's desired for that particular asset category, or else we'll sell.
James, I'm just doing a poll at the moment, and the people have spoken and they want to know more about Ireland and education. So I think less of Ireland, but more on the education front. Do you want to say anything on that? Because I think a lot of investors do have kids. So, all the way from primary school up to university.
Yeah. How much time do you have? What I'll do is I'll go through. Yeah, because it's a huge area. But I'll go through a quick overview, and then I think the best thing to do would be like if people want to pop into us in the office there, and you guys can give them the sort of more detailed version of events. So yeah, it's not surprising that's the question, because most of our investors that I've met anyway, education is a big factor. I think it's one of the big pull factors for Ireland, and the Irish education system is very good. I think the last time we looked at the numbers, it was number 7 globally. It's definitely in the top 10. So the Irish education system would rank in the top 10 globally. A poll here. So that's a positive. And then there's the system is not too dissimilar to the Hong Kong system. We're both former British colonies, so there's a lot of sort of infrastructure that's the same. Our legal system is very similar. We're both common law countries. And I think the education system ends up being quite similar.
So the standard's very high, basically, on par with UK institutions.
Oh,
okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
So they've got nothing to worry about sending their kids to Ireland.
No, not at all. Very good education system. If anyone, for those who are paying attention, one of the things I mentioned earlier is that employers from Europe rank Irish graduates number 1 in Europe. You know, the reason that, you know, a lot of, when you're talking about all these corporations being in Ireland, sometimes people will talk about it as being a tax thing, but you know, if it was a tax thing, they'd be in Malta or Cyprus. The reason they're in Ireland is because we've got a very, very strong workforce, and the reason we've got such a strong workforce and people are able to come in and hire C-level execs and, you know, all of the people they need. You know, as I said, Google have a team of 10,000 people in Ireland. You know, the reason they're able to do that is because the workforce is so strong, because the education system is so strong.
Okay, makes sense.
So that's itself, I think, is a really strong testament to, you know, the strength of the Irish education system. And again, the government were very much on point on that. I think the government started investing in things like tech and pharma as far back as the 60s, and that's why we're the number 1 hub globally for both.
Awesome. I think we can call it a day here and wrap everything up. On my end, if anyone wants to reach out to BWall, we have a Hong Kong office, and I will be reaching out individually to everyone, and you'll have my email address, and our regional manager, Jeffrey Ling, will also reach out as well if you have any further questions.
I think, that's the best way to do it. I mean, the office is in TST, the K11 building.
K11, the new one, Atelier, yep.
Sorry, the new one. We usually get that mixed up. I think you know, you've only got a 40-minute or 45-minute window here, so we are covering things on a high level, and there's a lot more detail. I think the best thing to do is maybe pop into the office or set up a call, whatever's preferable, with one of our team, and we can chat through the more detailed aspects of things.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for your time, James. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
and Ray as well.
Thanks, Ray. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you. Bye.